We've passed the point of no return with Donald Trump. And if we don't call him out for his responsible activities in encouraging this, we're responsible as well.
Do you have any comment on the actual news story?
I just said I condemn political violence in all situations.
The ICE situation.
You did.
Keith Boykin put smug MAGA supporter Scott Jennings in his place during another fiery debate on Abby Phillips' show, this time over the actions of ICE. We're going to break down clips from yet another intense panel discussion, with Sarah Sidner filling in as host. Watching Keith Boykin completely shut down Scott Jennings was incredibly satisfying, and there's a lot to unpack from this exchange. I've got plenty of thoughts to share along the way, so let's jump right in and take a closer look together.
43-year-old Army veteran is in custody, accused of throwing an incendiary device at a federal building that houses offices for Immigration and Customs Enforcement in New York City. Now, you can see the moment that authorities say Andrew Arabaca threw the gasoline near the building. You see him throwing it there before lighting it on fire. Officials say the suspect had 2 axes, a hammer, a machete, and 3 knives, and a sign that read, quote, "ICE off our streets." The FBI warned he, quote, came armed with bad intentions. The White House border czar refused to comment on the investigation as it is ongoing, telling reporters he would let the investigation play out. But he did talk about who he thinks is partly to blame anyway, naming leftist politics for the current climate surrounding immigration enforcement.
What happened in front of the federal building is another example of attacking ICE. And I'm sure if you ask that person why he did it, he should repeat the talking points I just said that you hear from Democratic members of Congress, the Democratic mayors and governors who simply want ICE to go away. And us to keep attacking and miscommunicating what ICE does every day, calling them Nazis and comparing ICE to the Nazi regime. Are you kidding me? And for any member of Congress to keep attacking ICE and calling them fascists and Nazis, I said it 1,000 times. If they're a Nazi for enforcing the law, what's that make them? They wrote the law.
Now, before we open it up to the table here, we invite you at home to join this debate. Head to CNN.com/Abby and weigh in. We'll get to some of your comments throughout the show. Scott, I'm going to start with you. Words do matter. So do actions, right? I think we've talked about this before with, Republicans saying things, Democrats saying things, and then there's the actions of ICE as well. When you look at this, do you agree with Homan that this is something that is because of Democrats, or is this a single guy who decided to do something that was illegal?
Of course I agree with Homan, and it's not a single guy. This is another in a long string of attacks on ICE personnel, ICE facilities. There's been a massive spike in violence against ICE agents, really against all law enforcement, specifically federal law enforcement out there. So I think Mr. Homan is absolutely correct. And I think you've got members of Congress, the mayor of New York City, governors, as Homan said, all sorts of people out there who are using language that would lead someone to go do these kinds of things. It's despicable. These people are effectively political vigilantes. They've been programmed by the left to go out and take matters into their own hands. And it ought to be stopped right now. I noticed Mamdani today, put out a statement saying, this is bad, we're going to cooperate. This is the same guy who has said some of the worst things about ICE, who says he wants to defund the police. And makes a lot of anti-law enforcement rhetoric a staple of his political movement. I don't know how you can reconcile those positions, and I don't suppose they'll even try, but I think Homan's right.
But is it possible that it is the actions of ICE that have people talking like this, not just getting messaging from the Democrats, but seeing what's happening in their communities?
So if you believe that a government agency is doing something that you don't like, and your choices are A, cast a vote, B, use your words, or C, go set off an incendiary device at the federal building in New York City, and you pick C, there's no justification for this. There's no rationalization of it, and that's patently ridiculous if that is what anybody's going to argue tonight.
Keith, how do you
Let's take Scott's scenario. If you believe a government agency is doing something wrong, do you use your vote, do you use your words, or do you resort to violence? In one very clear example, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, implicitly encouraged people to resort to violence. That was the January 6th insurrection. He didn't tell people your vote was enough. The 80-something lawsuits that we filed were enough. He didn't tell people we're just going to settle this in sort of a peaceful way. He actually encouraged people to walk from the ellipse to the Capitol, not knowing what might happen, and knowing that these people were armed and violent. This guy, Donald Trump, is responsible for some of the worst, most incendiary, most politically violent rhetoric in our country. So I don't accept this statement from Scott at all. Violence, political violence is wrong, whether it's left or right. The problem is I don't know any president on the Democratic side in my lifetime who's ever encouraged political violence. In fact, I don't know any Republican president in my lifetime who's ever encouraged political violence until Donald Trump. We have crossed the proverbial standard here. We've passed the point of no return with Donald Trump. And if we don't call him out for his responsible activities in encouraging this, we're responsible as well.
Do you have any comment on the actual news story?
I just said I condemn political violence in all situations. What you did is you took this situation and you agreed with Tom Homan's talking point that somehow this is a Democratic case. But the reality is the studies have shown that in the past decade or so, 112 of the past right-wing, of the 112 right-wing murders have taken place. Only 13 have taken place from the left.
So you don't have any comment on this?
No, I just told. What else is there to say except I condemn it, Scott? You want me to say more than that?
Yeah.
What else? You don't say. You haven't said yet. What have you said about Donald Trump and the January 6th insurrection? The fact that he pardons people. The fact that he actually tried to create a $1.8 billion fund to support those people.
I'm long on the record about political.
I love what Keith Boykin does here, calmly laying out the facts while Scott Jennings sits there wearing that familiar smug expression. Scott Jennings asks Keith Boykin, "Do you have any comments on this story?" That's pretty ironic coming from the same guy who, almost every night on Abby Phillips' show, responds to nearly every topic the exact same way. It doesn't matter what the story is or what criticism is being made about Donald Trump by Democrat, liberal, or anyone on the left, Scott's answer is always, yeah, but what about Biden? Or, yeah, but what about the Democrats? So it's pretty rich to hear him act like everyone else should stay on topic when he constantly changes the subject himself. Then Scott rolls out the usual talking point about violence against law enforcement officers. He mentions that 109 officers died in the line of duty in 2025, but he leaves out an important detail. Most of those deaths were not caused by violent attacks. Many were the result of traffic accidents, which have long been one of the leading causes of line-of-duty deaths for police officers. For comparison, 240 officers died on duty in 1975, when the U.S. population was much smaller. Once again, it feels like another misleading talking point pushed by MAGA supporters like Scott Jennings. Keith Boykin also highlights what I see as a major difference between the left and the right. He condemns violence no matter who commits it, whether it comes from someone on the left or someone on the right. Scott Jennings, on the other hand, only seems willing to criticize violence when it fits his political side. He rarely calls out violence committed by people on the right, and he certainly never seems willing to criticize Donald Trump. Let's watch a little more of what Scott Jennings has to say.
The reason why Democrats did not do anything about that is because your president, Donald Trump, told them not to. They had a bipartisan immigration bill, and Donald Trump called up the United States senators and said, "Do not pass that bill."
No, I'm talking about the law.
I'm talking about immigration enforcement. You said, "Why didn't Democrats do something about all the immigrants coming in?" They tried to do something, and Donald Trump said, "Don't do it." As far as reforming or limiting ICE, Democrats are taking action right now. They're sending a letter. First of all, not that that's enough.
Why didn't they just stop the illegal immigration?
But 10 people have been killed by ICE since this year.
A lot of people have been killed by illegal immigrants
in the past year. Since Donald Trump took office. That didn't happen under Biden's administration.
Let me make sure I understand. This deranged anti-ICE leftist tries to blow up the federal office in New York today, and that's Donald Trump's fault. Joe Biden.
Nobody said that.
You just gave a...
Here we go again. This is the same Scott Jennings who was just asking Keith Boykin, "Can't you stay on the subject?" And "Do you have any comments on this story?" Yet almost immediately, he falls right back into his favorite routine. Like clockwork, Scott pivots to his usual, "Yeah, but what about Biden?" argument instead of sticking to the issue being discussed. It's the same predictable playbook he seems to rely on whenever the conversation becomes uncomfortable.
No one said that.
Joe Biden doesn't enforce immigration laws, and that's Donald Trump's fault. I'm trying to identify the end of the Choose Your Own Adventure book where it doesn't end with it's Donald Trump's fault. Stephen is right. They did not enforce the law. And you know who will tell you that? Anybody that works for ICE today will tell you when they were working there under Biden, they were told not to enforce immigration law. We haven't passed any new laws. And today, we had the 14th straight month of no releases at the border. The border is closed. Not a single new law was passed. The only difference is the feds are enforcing longstanding existing law. And you have Democrats now demonizing the people enforcing it, and you have people like this lunatic showing up trying to blow up the federal building.
Nobody's supporting this guy who did the firebombing at the federal building today. So let's get that clear. What we are saying is that if you're going to condemn political violence, at least be consistent, because the top purveyor of political violence in our country is Donald Trump.
Let me just
That was a real mic drop moment from Keith Boykin. He argued that Donald Trump has done more than anyone else to fuel political violence in the United States. How does Scott Jennings respond? He flashes a smirk, looks toward the camera, and takes a sip of his drink because he doesn't seem to have much of an answer beyond his usual, "Yeah, but what about Biden?" response. That's the pattern we see over and over. Instead of directly addressing the point being made, he shifts the conversation elsewhere. From my perspective, Scott Jennings rarely offers arguments based on policy that connect with a broad audience, and much of the political messaging from Trump and MAGA supporters centers on accusing their opponents of the very behavior they're being criticized for. Keith Boykin also brings up reports of people who died during ICE encounters, arguing that no one should lose their life during immigration enforcement unless absolutely unavoidable. He also questions whether those cases involve violent criminals who posed an immediate threat, suggesting that broad claims portraying the political left as encouraging violence simply do not match the facts as he sees them. Boykin makes that case directly on Abby Phillips' show, while Scott Jennings never appears willing to engage with that argument head-on. Now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this heated exchange? Do you agree with Keith Boykin's argument about Donald Trump's role in today's political climate? Or do you think Scott Jennings made the stronger case? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more political commentary.